The sea was restless that night. A cold wind carried secrets across the waves. My name is Detective James Carver. 30 years I spent unraveling lives, murders, betrayals, truths buried in shadows. I don't feel much anymore, but I see everything. Tonight, I'm telling you about Natalie Wood, a star whose light went out too soon. Her death, November 29, 1981, off Catalina Island, California, is a puzzle I've turned over in my mind for decades. Was it an accident or something darker? Let's walk through it, step by step, as I did when the case first crossed my desk. By the way, if you're listening to this story in the middle of the night or lying in a dark room or somewhere on your way home, leave a comment telling me where you are and what time it is. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, so every time I tell a new story, you'll be the first to hear it, in the right place, at the right time. It was Thanksgiving weekend, 1981. Natalie Wood, actress, 43 years old, was aboard the yacht Splendor, anchored near Two Harbors, Catalina Island. With her were her husband, Robert Wagner, actor and producer, Christopher Walken, her co-star in the film Brainstorm, and Dennis Davern, the yacht's captain. 4 people, 1 small boat, a night of drinking, and a death that would spark questions for decades. Wood's body was found the next morning, floating in the Pacific, a mile from the yacht, clad in a nightgown, socks, and a down jacket. The coroner ruled it an accidental drowning. But the story doesn't end there. It never does. Catalina Island is a quiet place, 22 miles off Los Angeles, a haven for the wealthy seeking escape. The Splendor was a 60-foot yacht, luxurious but confined. Imagine it. 3 celebrities, 1 captain, all sharing tight quarters. Wood and Wagner had been married twice, first in 1957, divorced in 1962, then remarried in 1972. Their relationship was stormy, marked by jealousy and passion. Walken, younger, charismatic, was a new presence in Wood's life, working closely with her on Brainstorm. Davern, loyal to Wagner, handled the boat and observed the tension simmering on board. That night, they'd all been drinking. Wine, champagne, maybe more. The sea was choppy, the mood choppier. Wood was afraid of water, everyone knew it. She'd nearly drowned as a child during a film shoot, and the fear never left her. Yet, her body was found in the ocean, her blood alcohol level at 0.14%, enough to impair judgment, but not enough to explain everything. The dinghy, a small inflatable boat tied to the Splendor, was found nearby, its oars unused, its motor untouched. How did a woman terrified of water end up alone in the Pacific? That's where my mind started working, piecing together the fragments. The official report said Wood slipped, perhaps while trying to retie the dinghy or climb aboard it. The jacket she wore, heavy when wet, could have pulled her under. But there were bruises on her body, arms, legs, face, not easily explained by a simple fall. And the timeline? That's where things get murky. Wagner said he last saw her around 10:45 p.m. when she went to bed. Walken was in his cabin. Davern's story shifted over the years, but he initially backed Wagner. By morning, Wood was gone, and the search began at dawn. I've seen cases like this before, high profile, messy, with too many eyes watching. The truth gets buried under fame, money, and fear. In 1981, the investigation was quick. The Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department and the coroner closed the case in weeks. No foul play, they said. But questions lingered, fueled by whispers in Hollywood and a media frenzy. Why was the dinghy loose? Why were there bruises? Why did no one hear a scream? I wasn't on the scene then, but I've read the reports, the interviews, the theories. I've walked the deck of that yacht in my mind 1,000 times. Let's start where it begins. The night of November 28th. They'd spent the day on the island, dining at Doug's Harbor Reef restaurant. Witnesses said the group was loud, celebratory, but tense. Wood and Walken seemed close, laughing together, which didn't sit well with Wagner. Jealousy is a quiet poison. It doesn't always show, but it's there, in glances, in silences. They returned to the Splendor around 10 p.m. What happened next is where the story fractures. We need to rebuild the hours, minute by minute, to see where the truth might hide. The night of November 28, 1981, was cold, the kind that seeps into your bones. The Splendor rocked gently off Catalina Island, its lights dim against the vast, dark Pacific. I've learned over the years that truth lives in the details, the small moments that don't align, the gaps no one explains. To understand Natalie Wood's death, we need to walk through those final hours, step by step, as if we were there. Let's rebuild the timeline, not as it was told, but as it might have been. It starts in the late afternoon. Natalie Wood, Robert Wagner, Christopher Walken, and Dennis Davern, the yacht's captain, went ashore to Two Harbors. They dined at Doug's Harbor Reef restaurant, a cozy spot popular with boaters. Witnesses, waitstaff, other patrons, noted the group's mood. They were drinking heavily, wine, champagne, cocktails. Wood and Walken were animated, talking closely, their laughter carrying across the room. Wagner, by some accounts, was quieter, his eyes sharp, watching his wife and her co-star. Davern, ever the employee, stayed on the edges, observant but not involved. The party returned to the Splendor around 10 p.m., the alcohol loosening tongues and tempers. Back on the yacht, the night turned. The main salon where they gathered was a tight space, wood-paneled, intimate, but not built for privacy. Imagine it. 4 people, the air thick with wine and unspoken tensions. Wagner later said he and Walken got into a heated discussion about Wood's career, her time away from their children for brainstorm. Voices rose. Wood, tired or frustrated, left the salon around 10:30 or 10:45 p.m., heading to the master cabin. Wagner said he stayed up, talking with Walken, until he noticed she was gone. That's his story, the one he gave police. Davern's initial account aligned with Wagner's. He said he was in the wheelhouse, away from the argument, and didn't see Wood after she went to her cabin. Walken, too, told police he retired to his own cabin after the discussion, leaving Wagner alone. The official timeline has Wood in bed by 10:45, Wagner checking on her around midnight, finding her missing, and the search beginning shortly after. By 1:30 a.m., Wagner radioed for help. The harbor master and Coast Guard were alerted. At 7:44 a.m., Wood's body was found, floating a mile from the Splendor, near a rocky cove called Blue Cavern Point. But timelines are fragile things. They bend under scrutiny. Let's slow it down. Wagner's midnight check on Wood, is that precise? People don't always mark the hour in a haze of alcohol. And the dinghy, the yacht's small inflatable boat, was found adrift nearby, its oars stowed, its motor off. The theory was Wood tried to take it, maybe to leave the yacht, and fell into the water. But she feared water her whole life. Would she, at 43, drunk in a nightgown, climb into a dinghy alone? I've seen fear shape people's choices. It doesn't bend that far. Then there's the gap between 10:45 p.m. and midnight. What happened in that hour or two? No one heard a splash, a cry, nothing to suggest a fall. The Splendor wasn't a cruise ship. It was small, sounds carried. Walken and Davern were supposedly in their cabins, Wagner in the salon. Yet no one noticed Wood moving around, untying the dinghy, slipping into the night. And the dinghy itself, why was it loose? Davern said it was tied securely earlier. Wagner said Wood might have been adjusting it, as it sometimes banged against the hull. Possible, but convenient. Another detail, the weather. The sea was rough, with swells of 3 to 5 feet. A fall from the yacht's swim platform where the dinghy was tied could have been easy in those conditions, especially for someone unsteady. But the platform was low, close to the water. A fall there doesn't explain the bruises found on Wood's body. wrists, shins, face. Bruises don't form instantly. They suggest something happened before she entered the water. And her blood alcohol level, 0.14%, with traces of a motion sickness pill, could have made her disoriented, but not incapacitated. I keep coming back to that hour, 10:45 to midnight. Wagner's story hinges on it, but it's soft, unverified. Davern's later accounts, years after in books and interviews, suggested more. He claimed he heard an argument between Wagner and Wood, loud and angry, before she vanished. He didn't tell police this in 1981, though. Why? Loyalty? Fear? And Walken, always vague, said little beyond his cabin retreat. 3 men, 1 woman, a yacht in the dark. Someone knows more than they said. As we move forward, we'll look at the clues, the physical evidence, the statements, the contradictions that don't sit right. The coroner's report, the dinghy, the bruises, they all tell a story, but not the same one. Something happened on that yacht, and the truth is in the cracks of what was said and what wasn't. The truth is a shadow, slipping through your fingers. In Natalie Wood's case, the clues don't align neatly. They fight each other, like witnesses with different stories. Let's start with the physical evidence. Wood's body was found at 7:44 a.m. on November 29, 1981, a mile from the Splendor, near Blue Cavern Point. She wore a flannel nightgown, red wool socks, and a heavy down jacket. The coroner's report listed her cause of death as drowning, with hypothermia as a contributing factor. Her blood alcohol level was 0.14%, and traces of a motion sickness drug, likely Dramamine, were in her system. These are facts, cold and clear. But then come the bruises, on her wrists, shins, knees, and a small abrasion on her face. The coroner initially called them superficial, consistent with a fall or struggle against the water. I've seen bodies pulled from the sea. Bruises like that don't always mean violence, but they raise questions. The dinghy is another piece. It was found adrift, not far from Wood's body, its oars stowed, motor untouched. The Splendor's swim platform, where the dinghy was tied, was low to the water, slippery in the choppy seas. The official story: Wood, drunk, tried to retie the dinghy or take it to shore, slipped, and fell. The heavy jacket, waterlogged, pulled her under. But Wood's fear of water was no secret. Her sister Lana said Natalie wouldn't even swim in a pool alone. Climbing into a dinghy at night in a storm, that's a stretch. And the dinghy's condition, no signs of use, suggests it wasn't her destination. Witness statements are where things tangle. Robert Wagner, Wood's husband, told police he last saw her around 10:45 p.m. when she went to bed. He and Christopher Walken argued about her career, he said, and after Walken retired to his cabin, Wagner stayed in the salon. Around midnight, he checked the master cabin. Wood was gone, the dinghy too. He radioed for help by 1:30 a.m. Dennis Davern, the captain, initially backed this up, saying he was in the wheelhouse, unaware of any trouble. Walken told police he was in his cabin after the argument, hearing nothing. 3 men, none claiming to have seen or heard Wood leave. On a 60-foot yacht, that's hard to swallow. But Davern's story shifted. Years later, in a 1992 book and 2011 interviews, he claimed he heard Wagner and Wood arguing loudly after Walken went to bed. He said Wagner was jealous, enraged by Wood's closeness with Walken at dinner. Davern even suggested Wagner delayed calling for help, though he didn't say this in 1981. Why the change? Money from book deals? Guilt? Or pressure to stay quiet back then? I've seen witnesses rewrite their stories. Sometimes they're chasing truth, sometimes something else. Then there's the coroner's report, amended in 2012 after new attention to the case. The Los Angeles County Coroner's Office changed the cause of death from accidental drowning to drowning and other undetermined factors. The bruises, they said, could have occurred before she entered the water, not just from a fall. The time of death was murky. Hypothermia could have delayed it, meaning she was alive in the water longer than thought. This opened the door to speculation. Was there a struggle on the yacht? Did someone know she was in the water and do nothing? Contradictions pile up. Wagner said the dinghy sometimes banged against the hull, and Wood might have gone to secure it. But Davern said it was tied tightly earlier. No one heard a splash or scream, yet the yacht was small, the night quiet except for the wind, and the timeline, 10:45 p.m. to midnight, has no witnesses to Wood's movements. Wagner's check at midnight is the only marker, and it's his word alone. Walken's silence is another gap. He's never elaborated beyond his initial statement. A man like that, observant, sharp, why so quiet? Other clues come from the island. A couple on a nearby boat, the Capri, later reported hearing a woman's cries around midnight saying, "Help me, I'm drowning." They didn't act, assuming it was a prank or misunderstanding. The harbor master noted Wagner's call at 1:30 a.m. seemed calm, not panicked. Small details, but they don't fit the neat accident narrative. I've worked cases where the smallest inconsistency, a voice, a delay, cracked everything open. The evidence suggests two paths: accident or something deliberate. An accident fits if you believe Wood, impaired, braved her fear to climb into the dinghy and fell. But the bruises, the untouched dinghy, the silent yacht, they point elsewhere. Was there an argument that turned physical? Did someone see her fall and hesitate? The clues don't scream murder, but they whisper doubt. As we move to the suspects and their motives, we'll look at the people on that yacht: Wagner, Walken, Davern, and what drove them. Somewhere in their actions or their silence lies a turning point that changed this case forever. The truth doesn't always reveal itself. It hides in motives, in silences. On the Splendor, 4 people carried their own secrets that night. To understand Natalie Wood's death, we need to look at the suspects, their reasons, and the moment that shifted this case from accident to mystery. I've spent years turning over cases like this, where the line between mistake and malice blurs. Let's walk through the players: Robert Wagner, Christopher Walken, Dennis Davern, and what might have driven them. Robert Wagner, Wood's husband, is the central figure. He was 51, a successful actor, married to Wood twice, their relationship a cycle of love and conflict. Jealousy was a constant shadow. Wood's career was resurging with Brainstorm, pulling her away from home, closer to Walken. At dinner on November 28, 1981, witnesses saw Wagner's tension as Wood and Walken laughed together. Later, on the yacht, Wagner admitted to arguing with Walken about Wood's work. Did that anger spill over to her? Davern, years later, claimed Wagner and Wood fought loudly after Walken retired. Wagner's story, last seeing her at 10:45 p.m., finding her gone at midnight, has gaps. His call for help at 1:30 a.m. was calm, almost measured, per the harbor master. A man whose wife is missing doesn't always sound so steady. Motive, jealousy, rage, a moment of lost control. If Wood fell during an argument or if he knew she was in the water, his delay in calling for help could suggest fear of exposure. Christopher Walken, 38, was the outsider. A rising star, he was Wood's co-star, their chemistry evident on and off set. Wagner's jealousy fixated on him, but Walken's role that night is vague. He said he argued with Wagner, then went to his cabin, hearing nothing after. His silence since has been near absolute. He's never elaborated, never fueled the speculation. Was he protecting himself or simply uninvolved? Motive is harder to pin here. If Walken and Wood were close, it could have sparked conflict, but there's no evidence he was awake when she vanished. Still, his reticence is a question mark. I've seen men stay quiet not from guilt, but from knowing too much. Dennis Davern, the captain, is the wild card. In his 30s, loyal to Wagner, he was the hired hand, managing the splendor. In 1981, he supported Wagner's timeline, saying he was in the wheelhouse, unaware of trouble. But by 1992, in a book, and later in 2011 interviews, he changed his story. He claimed he heard Wagner and Wood arguing, that Wagner delayed calling for help, and that the mood on the yacht was volatile. Why wait years to speak? Loyalty to Wagner, fear of losing work, or something darker? Davern's shifting account suggests he knew more than he told police. His motive, if any, might have been complicity, covering for Wagner to protect his own position. I've seen men like Davern, caught between truth and self-preservation, crack under time's weight. The breakthrough came in 2011, when the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department reopened the case. Davern's new statements, combined with public pressure and the couple's report of hearing cries for help, forced a second look. The coroner's 2012 amendment, changing the cause of death to drowning and other undetermined factors, was pivotal. It acknowledged the bruises might predate the water, suggesting a possible struggle. This wasn't proof of murder, but it broke the accident narrative wide open. The sheriff named Wagner a person of interest in 2018, not a suspect, but close enough to stir suspicion. No charges were filed. Evidence was too thin, memories too faded. Yet this moment shifted the case, turning whispers of foul play into a public question. What really happened? The evidence leans both ways. An accident. Wood, impaired, tries to secure the dinghy, slips and drowns. Her fear of water no match for alcohol's haze. The bruises could be from flailing in the sea, the dinghy's loose state a coincidence. But the other path, foul play, fits too. An argument with Wagner, fueled by jealousy, turns physical. She falls or is pushed, and he hesitates, fearing scandal. Davern, loyal, stays quiet. Walken, detached, sees nothing. The bruises, the delayed call, the cries heard nearby, they point to a fight gone wrong, a cover-up born of panic. No hard evidence. Blood, weapons, witnesses, pins it to murder. The sea swallowed the truth. I lean toward accident, but doubt lingers. Wagner's story has holes. Davern's late confessions muddy the water, and Walken's silence feels deliberate. The 2011 reopening gave us clarity, but no resolution. The case remains open, cold, a file gathering dust. Someone on that yacht knows more. They've carried it for 44 years. Natalie Wood's death is a wound that won't close. The splendor, a floating stage for fame and frailty, holds its secrets still. Was it a slip in the dark, or a moment of rage that changed everything? I've seen cases where truth stays buried, not for lack of evidence, but because people choose silence. Wagner, Walken, Davern. They've lived with this longer than Wood lived her life. The Pacific took her, but it didn't erase the questions. Justice in cases like this is elusive. It's not always a courtroom, a sentence, a confession. Sometimes it's just the weight of knowing carried to the grave. What do you think? Accident or something more? And what does it say about us when a star's death becomes a mirror for our own doubts about truth? Thanks for listening. See you in the next video.